I'm the chair.
Right.
I'll call this meeting.
Oh, now I can go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Port Washington Common Council meeting Tuesday, August 17th, 2021. Seeing all aldermen and women are here. As roll call, please join with me for the Pledge of Allegiance, which tonight is going to be led by a couple of our great seasoned citizens, senior citizens from up at Harbor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It appears little Miss Alexander wants to become a state finance expert on water utility bonding tonight. All right, everyone, welcome to the meeting. I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Postel.
Second.
Second by Alderman Pleitner. Any questions or discussion on the motion?
There was one revision I was going to recommend, and that's that city engineer and city planner were in attendance, but they weren't listed on the minutes.
Excellent find. Thank you. So with that adjustment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Excellent. I'm going to move up on the mayor's business. I have two requests. One is under new business tonight on the agenda item. We have a lengthier agenda, and we have two reports at the end that we'd like to move up. The first is a presentation by the city assessor, and then the second is land agreement for phase 2 of Prairie's Edge, a second addendum that should not take too long. So if there's no opposition to that. Okay. All right. Then under mayor's business, I would like to start out. I'm going to go B first and then my updates. Wanted to thank Melissa for contacting us. We've got a couple of proclamations, but this Saturday is Senior Citizens Day, and we've got a couple of members of Harbor who came down today. So if you guys wouldn't mind standing up as the ambassadors, thank you for coming. I know one, of course, is the famous Mrs. Canal-Bani, who was the high school secretary at Port Washington High School for many, many years. Not when I was there, but when my brothers were there. So they have wonderful stories. And when I student taught there, she was incredibly warm to me, even though the art department did give me a hard time. So a couple of things I wanted to share about Senior Citizens Day. And before I read the proclamation, as a history teacher or former history teacher, one of the things that just always really impresses me is when you think of over the course of someone's lifetime, what they've lived through. So any senior citizen today who's over 70 years old was born at the dawn of the Cold War, born right after World War II or during the Korean War, lived through many different great historical and sad historical events, whether that was when they were in middle school or high school when John Kennedy was assassinated, Martin Luther King's assassination. Major historical things that we read about were part of their formative years as kids. Then obviously many of them served both in Korea and Vietnam, and for that service and what they went through is something we're grateful for. But then also the tail end of many of those historical events, born at the dawn of the Cold War and then lived to see communism fall in Eastern Europe and the freedoms that had gone with that, and then continued through all these different historical things. And I think one of the things about the generation that my mom and dad are a part of as well is that they're incredibly resilient and they continue to live and prosper through a variety of different things. Two great recessions, right now a pandemic, and all of those different pieces, as well as what goes on and what's been going on in the Middle East for 20 years. But I think one of the most impressive things is if they've lived in Port Washington their entire lives, they've seen our community evolve greatly from a downtown marina area that was centered on industry and manufacturing to now our city evolving into this renaissance of more of a tourist committee and the industry on the outskirts of town, and us really utilizing our natural resources. So we appreciate everything you've done from that. So I just want to quickly read this proclamation from Senior Citizens Day because I did some research on why it's August 21st and who assigned it. So Ronald Reagan obviously has a great history here in the city of Port Washington, and he was the one who marked August 21st as Senior Citizens Day. So whereas National Senior Citizens Day recognizes seniors who have spent their lives contributing to society and have impacted everyone's lives for the better, And whereas Ronald Reagan took the initiative to honor seniors in 1988 when he signed Proclamation 5847 and marked August 21st as the day seniors will be celebrated. Throughout our history, older people have achieved much for our families, our communities, and our country. And that remains true today and gives us ample reason this year to reserve a special day in honor of the senior citizens who mean so much to our land. And whereas Reagan proclaimed, for all they have achieved throughout life and for all they continue to accomplish, we owe older citizens our thanks and heartfelt salute. We can demonstrate our gratitude and esteem by making sure that our communities are good places in which to mature and grow older, places in which older people can participate to the fullest and can find the encouragement, acceptance, assistance, and services they need to continue to live their lives with independence and dignity. Whereas the City of Port Washington values and appreciates our senior citizens for their commitment to our community and their role in our storied history, and whereas every generation today benefits from the contributions, sacrifices, innovations, inventions, service, and commitment by the seniors of our community, now, therefore, I, Theodore Knightsky, Mayor of Port Washington, along with our council in the City of Port Washington, Wisconsin, recognize our seniors, and I do hereby proclaim August 21st, 2021 as Senior Citizens Day in Port Washington. So thank you for all you've done, and please join me up here. I'll hand you guys the proclamation, and council, if you want to scoot in, they'd like to take our picture. Yeah. I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm going to go over here.
The county board chair, I'm impressed.
No Joe Burke tonight. Oh, I cut you out of the picture.
Good job.
You qualify to be in this forum? You want to be in it? Thank you, guys.
Thank you all so much.
Enjoy Saturday. Have a beer and a big leg for me. Thank you, Melissa, for organizing this. And then our city clerk, Susan, will get one to our senior center here in Port Washington as well. So thank you for that. Okay, real quick under mayor's business then, just to make sure that you guys are in the loop on a couple of things. First, I'd ask that we keep our thoughts in prayer with a lifetime city employee, Leo Duffrin, as he's overcoming some different medical issues. His service to the city is invaluable, and as we know, that man has dedicated his life to the service of our community. So please keep your thoughts and prayers with Leo. Also, took a tour of the Lighthouse last week with Bill Shannon from the Ozaki Press, JD, and a contractor who's going to put together a rough scope of work on that piece. We'll be working with Rob on that project, but we'll get back an estimated cost for the entire project. Continue to work with Representative Brooks' office and Senator Strobel's office on some different financing pieces. The Department of Administration is going to reach out to the city administrator and our city engineer as to some financing options that they have. They said they've got a strong relationship with the city of Port Washington. So the goal here is, as we head into budget, to be able to see what contribution the city would need to make in order to get the lighthouse up to speed. We toured the inside, which just as a lifetime Port Washington kid, climbing to the top of that lighthouse is something that you were dared to do a lot, but you never really got the chance. And I went inside that piece. I brought for you all a piece of the glass from the inside so you could see it because it impressed me so much. So I'll pass it around. Please be careful. It is sharp. But one of the things that we learned out there when the engineer and the contract manager was there is these are from the portholes. And over the nearly 100 years that glass was in the portholes, the steel structure of the lighthouse through the storms actually has some movement. And that will cause one of the portholes to, these will give a little bit and then eventually crack. And then water freezing. And that's why many of the portholes are blown out. So I'm going to put on our Facebook page in a couple of days the pictures that we took out there. But I'll tell you what, it was pretty cool. And I didn't really realize that thing's almost 6 stories tall when you're standing on top of it. And while we were out there, we got to see the upgrades to the breakwater. And that's going to be awesome. That's going to look fantastic. The other piece is I just want to thank, Tony and the city departments. Garbage collection has been on everyone's mind in the city of Port Washington, and I was glad to see that the city's taking action to terminate our contract with the current contractor for those garbage collection services, and we're moving about as swiftly as we can. I appreciate the communication that went out today on Facebook as well. If you didn't see that email, please capture that and make sure to send it to concerned citizens in your ward. We're one of many neighboring communities that are in the same situation, but I do appreciate it, and I am grateful for the patience for our citizens as well. I know this is very frustrating. Be a little easier if it was winter and it was cold, but it's smelly and hot. And then the other thing is I do also appreciate the city's work, and just a little shout out to Judy Klum from downstairs who answers the phone here, who's done a nice job with the customer service on that. Just a couple of other things really quickly. Earlier this summer, in the middle of summer, I just wanted to thank, for my job, hosted a leadership conference on the Bluff, and I thought the Park and Rec Department worked with my assistant and our team really, really well. We took out all the necessary permits, all of the different things the processes that were put in place. Susan's office was fantastic. Kylie was fantastic. More importantly, we brought a couple hundred people into Port Washington who didn't really know much about our community. And our local restaurants really shined. Tello's, Beanies, and Yummy Bones catered those events, and it was awesome. But more importantly, people got to see our town, and it was just like a proud moment I want to make sure that you knew about. Arts Commission, I talked about that during the election and earlier this spring. That's going to start to come together in September to talk about what a potential vision statement is and what we can do as a community around arts. We've got a lot of different philanthropic groups who want to begin to donate statues, do murals, et cetera. And I think it's important for the city to lead that with a vision so that there's no conflict down the road as we're seeing in some neighboring communities. Also, Tony and I are going to start working on a communication intern for the office, as well as some communication strategies. And then I'm going to be reaching out to a couple of alders to look at creating an ordinance committee. One of the things that I noticed is that we're kind of reactive in ordinance review. And in my career, I've never really been a part of something like that. We always had scheduled reviews of rules and laws. And I think it's important we start to do that and put together those proactive processes. When you read through all of our ordinances, we're just shy of having blue laws in there, like can't park a horse on the street in front of schooners after noon on Sunday. We don't really have one of those, but I'd like us to be able to get proactive and then get ourselves up to date with statute. We've been caught a couple times with that.
Real quickly?
Yes.
We do have an administrative committee, which is Pat, Dan, Paul, and Doug McManus. Okay? I couldn't find their duties in our code book. I'm sure since we have a administrative committee, it's in there somewhere. But that might be your beginning of your legislative committee or your ordinance.
Ordinance committee, that's a fantastic idea. One of the things we're going to...
Never met in 3 years.
All right. Well, under current ordinance, we can call a meeting within 6 hours, so we'll see you guys at midnight. I'm kidding. What we'll do is, as we get into strategic planning, and tonight when we talk about the mayoral ordinance, one of the pieces is each of those committees, boards, committees, commissions should have a charter that explains what the work is, has an identified timeline of the commitments for those pieces, et cetera. And Alderman Sigwart, that's a fantastic idea. And that's what I have under my mayoral updates. So thank you for your patience and grace on that. All right, at this time, we will welcome public comments. Your comments are welcome. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. If you need more time, contact the city administrator, and please ask that your topic be placed on a common council agenda. If you step to the microphone, please identify yourself and your address. Seeing none, we will then move on to agenda item 10A, presentation by city assessor, associated appraisals consultant on the 2021 City of Port Washington reevaluation assessment. Tony.
I can get this started off. So Luke Mack from Associated Appraisal is here to present on and provide an update on the reevaluation, how that's progressing, and then also some of the steps and processes that you'll be seeing underway over the next couple months. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Mack.
All right. Thank you, Tony. I've had the opportunity to meet some of you over the last 3 years that I've been here. For those of you I'm Luke Mack from Associated Appraisal. I've been a statutory assessor here. This is going to be my third year. Last year we decided that we were going to do a citywide revaluation this year to get everything up to 100% market value. Our assessed values in the community obviously were out of line in what they were currently selling for in the market. After months and months of field work, I got to say this year so far has been very successful. Property owners have been very cooperative with us, very willing to answer any questions. The city did decide to do an exterior revaluation, so we did do just exterior. If we were invited in to do the interior, we did. But property owners were not obligated to let us in. We did send out informational blotters, which most of you probably received in the mail. We did actually get a very good response. We were about 55% returned. So that was pretty good. That was more than what we were estimating. So property owners did mail back information in regards to the interior of their home. You will be getting calls in the next month. Notices will be going out in a couple weeks. The average increase for a residential property in the city is going to be 35%. So the first thing a property owner is going to do when they see their assessment going up $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 is going to say, well, why? So we are going to include, and I believe I did give Tony and Susan copies of those. I don't know if they gave them to you, but there's an informational sheet that we're going to attach to every single notice. That's going to give you kind of an update of why we do it. We try to steer away from taxes, but that's always the first question when you get your assessment notice. So we did say, last year's tax rate is not going to be this year's tax rate. It's obviously going to be dropping with the assessed values increasing substantially. So we did try to put that in there. We will have the open book. Let's see, we scheduled open book is going to be September 16th. And if we get a very good response in regards to appointments, we'll move it to the 17th as well and hold one on Friday. We're going to just go with the 16th for now. Other revals that we've had this year with major increases, for some reason, the turnout is low. I don't know if that's because a lot of people kind of understand, the market conditions right now. But attendance has been pretty low this year compared to years past, which is quite shocking to me, to be honest with you.
Is that 35% about typical for Southeast Wisconsin, Luke, or is that?
For this year and next year, I would say yes.
Sure.
Yes. And then commercials, we're going to see about 25% increase. So this year, you are going to see a shift from commercial to residential in property tax. So, and that's just something that, in the last few years, commercial has been paying more compared to what the sale prices are compared to residential. So the one question you guys are going to get is, well, why are you guys doing this at the height of the market? First and foremost, the easiest answer is it's state mandated. You have to be in compliance, so many years out of, I think it's 4 out of every 7 years. So once you get out of compliance, you have to get back in. If we didn't do it this year, we'd be at about 70%. So, and then the next question is going to say, well, when the market tanks, what is the city going to do? Well, again, the state mandates it. Obviously, I will report to the city officials every year, what our level of assessment is. And there's going to be different avenues to revalue at that time. I mean, the DOR recommends every 5 to 7 years, so you can kind of avoid the big shifts. But overall, there are going to be some pretty hefty increases. I mean, some are going to be 100%, some are going to double in value. And that's just because last time the revalue was done, that we noted that last time any revalue was done was in 2012. And by the looks of it, all the properties weren't done, just some of them. So it's a situation where some people haven't been revalued in over 10 years. So market conditions have changed. We have found in certain instances, additions, remodels, basement finishes, that wasn't on the record previously that we obviously added. So that would go into it as well. And then board review is going to be slated for October 6th. And we're going to hold that here. With the board review, obviously property owners can come in and object to their assessed value. After board review, the values are set. So going into next year, we will have some follow-up, obviously, in regards to our maintenance cycle. I would obviously, any one of you, and anyone in attendance, obviously, I would definitely recommend come into the open book if you have any questions. I guess for any of the aldermans that get any questions from property owners, like what do I do? First step is always to talk to the assessor. You know, you want to obviously know where I'm coming from. You know, I want to go through the record, make sure there's no clerical errors or, you know, obviously there's human error involved. So we do make mistakes. So obviously, you know, a quick conversation with the assessor could fix, you know, a minor situation. And then at that point, then I would recommend the board review. I mean, I'm pretty straightforward with property owners. Whatever I would present at board review in front of, you know, the city attorney and the board review members, I show them. We have beautiful binders put together with all the sales in the city. That's what I would present. So I would show them 3 comparable sales. I would show them, you know, what they sold for, you know, what theirs would be valued at. So we're pretty honest with property owners. We don't, you know, a lot of times they ask us questions about taxes. We can only make assumptions. And the assumption is, you know, if you go up the average increase, you're probably going to be the same. If you go up over the average, your taxes are going to go up. If you go under the average, you're going to go down. But we just try to take that time to educate the property owners because, like, you know, this hasn't happened in quite a while, so property owners are going to have questions. So is there anything that you guys have any questions for me?
When are these notices going out to homeowners?
The latest notice would go out September 3rd would be the latest.
Okay.
So,
To receive them over the next couple of weeks then?
yes, correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Luke, just one note here. Susan's email address is wrong on this sample. It's the old email address, Susan.
Okay, yep, and then right before we send notices out, I send a copy to Susan. She verifies before we send them.
Okay.
So, yep, thank you.
For Board of Review also, individuals that do choose to do that after open book, there's objection forms that have to be filed with me in advance. So there's a process for that. All their documentation has to be handed in with that in advance, so that all can be prepared for the actual hearings, and then hearing times will be set with me in advance for that.
Yep.
For that day.
So open book appointments, will say under notice, will be scheduled with our office, and board reviews statutorily, property owners have to call Susan. They don't have to call her. They have to show intent. They could run into her at the store and say, Susan, I'm coming to board. That's intent. That's legal. They can do that. They still have to file an objection. So they would still have to come fill one out or turn one into her. And that has to be done by Monday, October 4th by 4 o'clock, which is exactly 48 hours prior to the start of the meeting on Wednesday.
We also, regarding these notices that will be going out from the assessor, we'll be putting information out on Facebook and the city website to help residents be familiar with what's coming. Sometimes we can answer kind of a question-answer type thing. Any kind of outreach we can do,
Okay.
resources to call if they have questions.
Are we only having the one open book session and the one board of review? Because if somebody's out of town for something,
Open book will start with that first date. It will continue. However, individuals can contact the assessor by phone. Many of them may choose to do that, especially with the COVID situation ramping up again. And that's fine. They can
Okay.
do that. With board of review, the hearings, that's all scripted by statute. So those are held. And then if it starts at 4 p.m. until adjournment, if we have to adjourn and continue to another date because we're not finished, we have set aside dates after that. I'm finishing up getting verification from all of my members to make certain that they can all be there, including the alternate, should we need him. So then there are dates, but that all will be put also in the newspaper. That's required, that notice.
I just guess, I mean, it's just concerning that there's a one shot and if somebody's out of town that week.
And what we do is, if they call in and say, oh, hey, I'm going to be out of town that week, the open book session starts once you receive your notice until board review. So we give them the opportunity. I can set up times with them. We can work it out. So we do try to, for the open book, we are going to do in person as well as over the phone. So we're going to give the property owners the opportunity to choose if they want to come in person or if they want to call it over the phone.
It's more the board of review, and who knows how many are going to show up for that one. And again, only having one session or 1 week during 1 week,
Yeah,
limits.
board review is statutory. You only have to have 1 day. So if they can't be there, they have to, obviously, they would have to let Susan know 48 hours prior so they can schedule another date.
Yeah.
The open book is more of a
Right, that
kind of
one
an
I'm less worried
informal
about.
meeting. Yes.
Okay.
So Luke and Susan and Tony, I have a question, just two quick questions for us as we communicate this. One of the pieces I think that the general public sometimes struggles with is the difference between a levy rate and their mill rate, and then the impact of their reevaluation on their home. I would argue that most of our community members in the last 10 years, especially if they have not been reassessed, have been appraised with lending rates, et cetera. So I'm guessing these assessments are going to be a little closer to appraised values. But if we could include some sort of a graph or demonstration of that historical, what happens when everybody goes up and the total property valuation shifts and changes, what the true impact is, because many times your property taxes go down in this situation because there's all these new properties that were appraised at a low level or came in assessed low and now have been assessed at a regular rate. So it balances out and shifts. So I would just make that request if there's some sort of a visual in our communication. I can look for some samples of that.
We put visuals in with our binder that we bring to open book and to board that we can show property owners and they can look through them. It's more set towards the assessed value rather than kind of the tax, I guess, base and their
Sure, but the
obligation.
panic, Luke, hear me out here, is the general citizen's gonna freak out at a 35% increase in their property value. They're immediately gonna think that all their taxes are gonna go along with that, and they're not even gonna be close to that. So I'm asking us to be proactive in our communications to demonstrate, here's what mill rates have done in the past during revaluations on property values of $100,000. They've been at $1.04 or whatever it is. And just to kind of show that, because that's really not going to significantly change, because what we will ask for from the property taxpayers is just being spread out now over more money. Does that make sense?
You know, what I have in mind as you're saying that is we could use the tax rate from this year and just show the difference between what they paid in taxes this year and then adjust, well, I'd have to think about how to do that, but adjust it for what the tax base is going into next year and what taxes they would pay. So yeah, we can do that.
I'm just asking proactively because
Yep.
I can guarantee I'd probably be down here for the board review if I wouldn't know the difference between levy and mill rate.
Been able to put on our notice last year's mill rate, this year's estimated mill rate.
Sure.
So if I can, I can work with Susan and Tony, if we can get some sort of, I guess, close value of what the budget's going to be for the community this year, I can figure it out based on the assessed values that I'm going to be
Yeah.
at.
Thank you.
And then
The
we can
world
put that on
values
there.
USA Today style,
Yep.
quick.
Because it's always nice because then they can just say, okay, this is what last year's was. This year, take the tax rate times your assessment. Here's what this year's is. And they can
Yeah.
have
Thank
a
you.
little background information before they come in.
Alderman Gasper?
I was just going to say that because, with the levy limits and stuff, our levy is going to stay the same. Pending borrowing can impact that a bit. But the average homeowner in the city is going to see zero change.
Right.
But some people are going to see, a big increase. Some people see a decrease. But the average will be zero.
And that would be good to demonstrate because then you'll see it and it won't matter. So thank you for that. And then the last question I had is how do we work with or collaborate with neighboring communities with their assessments to ensure that, all the taxing entities don't see violent shifts in communication issues as they move forward, or do we?
It's very hard because Associated Appraisal, the closest one to here that we do is Grafton, and we just did one there last year. So when there's so many different assessors, and you look at, like the town of Port Washington, for example, the Department of Revenue, when they do their economic change each year, it can vary from community to community. So it's very hard because some communities are at 90% and some are at 70%. So it's a situation where, try to, obviously, we saw Grafton last year, we did that one. Very close to Port Washington, and, just happens we had to do them year back to back. That's kind of hard to do, to be honest with you, where you can get communities in your area to revalue all at once because then it becomes a budget thing where they may not want to spend the money. And And certain communities do it every year, every other year, depending on what agreement they have with their assessor at that time. So I guess in my experience, that's a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, okay.
Well, and just as a tag on to that too, the other variable in there probably to consider is the amount of development isn't the same across all communities. So it's kind of like apples and oranges when you're looking at the different communities. So whereas Port Washington might see, I don't know, 5%, the town of Port Washington sees 0.05%. So then their ratio is going to be impacted by that. And it never is going to get to a point where things are kind of equal that it would necessitate a reval across kind of a regional area, I guess I'll say.
Thank you for that. I mean, that was just a true wondering. Any other questions, comments from council?
I have one question for you. Right now, at the same time you're finishing up these assessments, American Transmission Company is buying easements up and down the power lines between Chestnut Street and Grand Avenue. Is that being taken into account in any way in the assessments? And how should I direct people who have questions on that to have that taken into account?
Is that happening currently this year?
It's happening currently this year, yes.
Then it would affect value next year.
Okay,
So we would get the transfer deed as the assessor from the state, and then we would adjust if, property was taken, we would adjust the land value for that being purchased. So that wouldn't have any effect on the reval this year, but it would have effect on January 1st, 2022.
okay. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right.
Any other questions or concerns? Luke, thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you guys
And
very much.
Susan, good luck through the process. Thank you. We'll all be out of town. Just kidding. All right, so new business as well is just a quick one here, review and possible approval of proposed second addendum to master development agreement and land purchase agreement for Phase 2. Council or Eric, all yours.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know if Attorney Wood has joined us on the phone. Do we know? She was going. Oh, hello, Attorney Wood. Can you hear me?
I'm here. Can you hear me? I can. Can you hear
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
me? Right.
Attorney Wood is on vacation, so we won't overstay our welcome and let her get on with her vacation. Last week, Friday, when the Common Council agenda material packet went out to you, you had a version of the proposed second addendum to the Master Development Agreement and Land Purchase Agreement for Prairie's Edge subdivision. This is the second of the three addenda that will be required. The first one was approved back in May, and here we are for the center phase of that project. In the memo that I sent you, I attempted to just sort of summarize briefly the history of the project in terms of the contractual aspects and also the financial aspects. Sort of set the table for you before we go on and take a quick look at that second addendum. There aren't many key provisions of the second addendum, so there are very few. I'll just touch on them now. First of all, the developer will be required to make an additional lump sum payment to the city in the approximate sum of $515,000, less credits for monthly financing payments made after the first lump sum payment, which was made on July 19th. So there'll be that lump sum payment coming in. According to the existing agreements, not the second addendum, but according to existing agreements, the developer, as soon as the city sends the developer an invoice for professional fees for the city engineer, planning, legal, and their consultants, will be contractually required to pay up to $75,000 contribution or reimbursement toward those fees. The second addendum also reiterates the developer's obligation to furnish, before commencing construction on that center phase, a financial guarantee in the form of a letter of credit. The letter of credit was provided by the developer for the public infrastructure and grading improvements in the first phase, the north phase. So this center phase, in that sense, follows suit. In terms of the timing of and I'll defer to Attorney Wood or to any of you who may have questions for Attorney Wood about the timing. But in terms of when that lump sum payment may be remitted by the developer, it appears as though that's a few months out, possibly into spring of next year. And the reason that the developer, it's my understanding, wants the second addendum approved at this time, again, I'll defer to Attorney Wood specifically, but as I understood it, the developer would like to proceed with the marketing, sale, and leasing of residential and commercial lots and spaces within Phase 2 of the subdivision. And so, and also to obviously signal and communicate to the developer's lender and investors that the project is moving forward to the next second of the 3 phases. Since you received the draft of the second addendum and since you received my memo, there are a couple of minor changes I handed out for you just prior to the meeting, and if you didn't get it, I've got a couple extra here. The very few changes on pages 2 and 3 of that second addendum, I took the liberty of highlighting those so that they're immediately apparent to you. The first is just a technical correction of a reference to a subsection of the land purchase agreement, not a significant legal or financial event there. And then on the reverse side of the handout, I highlighted at the bottom of page 3 some additional language that Attorney Wood and I thought appropriate late in the day today to specify when the letter of credit must be released by the city. We left the number of days blank, but it's a certain number of days following the inspection and certification of completion of the public infrastructure improvements if they're required. Attorney Wood and I, just so you know, sort of in conversation, thought maybe 7 days would be a reasonable time once those items are completed to have the city go ahead and release the letter of credit. I'll ask Rob at this time, since he's frankly a city official tasked with determining whether the completion of those infrastructure improvements is to the point where a letter of credit may be either reduced or released. Do you think 7 days is reasonable, Rob, or would you suggest some other time?
No, I mean, yeah, in general, that would be fine. I mean,
Okay. All right.
they would have to let us know if, say we'll be on vacation for 7 days or something like
Right,
that.
right.
I just want to make sure we
Got
live
it.
up to it, yeah.
Yep.
So
Okay.
there has to be
Attorney
good communication.
Is that 7 business days?
No, well, it was just conversation, seven calendar days. It could be 5 business days. Heck, it could be 10 in light of the vacation situation Rob's alluding to. Attorney Wood, did you hear the city engineer?
I did. I guess
The 10 days work?
we'll keep, I think our preference is to keep it to the 7 days. We definitely will let city engineer know when we are anticipating that the work will be completed or when the certifications will take place so that we can accommodate a vacation. But we'll certainly be reasonable with that, but we'd like to keep it to the 7 days if possible.
Okay.
So I'd be looking for a motion with the adjustment in there of the 7 days to accept the recommendations from Attorney Eberhardt.
Mayor, if I may, and if you'll excuse me,
go ahead.
council members, I neglected to mention this. Attorney Wood and I also agreed, and I don't frankly think it requires council approval, but that we would together revise those hypothetical examples of payment dates and then the related amounts that would be credited or adjusted from the lump sum payment. That being, in my view, merely a mathematical exercise, I would ask that you approve it subject to Attorney Wood and I putting in more complete and contemporary references than the ones in your packet. Thank you.
Did you capture that, Susan?
If I could just, just add one more piece of information to your explanation, Eric. The other important reason that we need to proceed with the addendum now is to get the grading done this fall. We did just get the owner letter from the city engineer so that we can send that off to the state CNR. Once we have those approvals, and obviously we'll have an agreement on the letter of credit form, we can go ahead and proceed with grading this fall. So that is a critical component of getting this addendum so that we can move forward.
Okay.
So, Mr. City Attorney, so you're saying is you'll put a date in here, but then the others are just examples of what the payment amounts given a certain date would be.
Yes,
Everything else in here is fixed with the changes you highlighted in yellow.
that's correct. Thank you. Yes.
So I'll move that we approve the agreement, second addendum to the master development agreement and land purchase agreement.
10 days? 7 days? At 10 days?
Yeah, with the 7 or, was it 7 or 10 days we agreed on?
7 days.
7 apparently. Rob would always like more, I know, but,
Good.
and I understand.
And I guess, I mean, is it 7 business days or?
If I can, if you'll permit me, quite frankly, it's up to the council whether it's 7 business days,
Okay.
7 calendar days, or 10 days. So it's really whatever this body feels comfortable
So
with.
I'll put it out there at 7 business days.
That equals 10. Okay, I'd be looking for a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Alderman Tierney. All in favor signify by
No,
saying,
I
oh,
like-
I'm sorry.
I like
Any questions or
discussion.
concerns?
Well, we haven't discussed it yet.
The questions are good.
Okay, ready? Was there a memo that I missed this afternoon from the city attorney, a second one?
No, there wasn't.
Because the first one I saw was that there was a request for a performance bond versus
Oh, that was to update you in response to your question, Alderman Sigwart, about certain questions about the agreement. And that's when I indicated to you, and we spoke on the phone as well today, that the developer was seeking to have the form of financial security be a bond, surety bond, and not a letter of credit. And after some gentle persuasion and discussion, they agreed that it would be a letter of credit. So it's a letter of credit.
that happened after our discussion.
It did,
Right,
yes, late in the day.
Second question, and this one's for Rob. This subdivision is unusual in that the only thing that's going to be in the letter of credit, I think, is going to be the grading and the utilities. Yes. Correct?
Right. Water and sewer, yes.
Right.
Yes.
And storm.
No,
No.
no, just water and sewer.
Oh, because
The storm is maintained, that's private.
Streets are private, okay?
Streets and storm are private.
Here's my theoretical question or hypothetical question. The letter of credit is to assure the city that the contractors will be paid if the developer, through reasons maybe beyond his control, can't pay them. So we can finish the project. Okay? In other words, the utilities that are going to be in a recorded subdivision would be part of the letter of credit, but the streets would not be. So the value of the street construction is not included in the letter of credit. So we could get the utilities in and never get streets built.
Yeah, in theory,
Well, more than theory, there's a potential that if the developer, I don't know, flies to Haiti, a good bad place to go right now, to Hawaii, and does not pay the contractors, the letter of credit would be used to finish the project. To finish the project, we'd have to finish the streets, but they're private.
and we talked about this.
We did, or you?
I think, I'm looking at Rick, I'm sorry. I believe we talked about this and it was essentially address the assurance that the city could not be held responsible for completing the construction of the streets.
If I could jump in, well, here. If I could, isn't that scenario predicated on the fact that then the land would revert back to the city?
No,
Well, here,
no, that would
No.
not cause the foreclosure of the city's mortgage.
Okay,
lien.
let's just go through. The utilities are installed. The letter of credit only covers the utilities. The contractor doesn't get paid, he pulls off the job, the developer goes bankrupt. And now we have utilities in the ground, but no streets because the streets are private. I'm just curious to what would happen. I know what happens in a public street subdivision. Everything gets completed. okay? And then it's up to the courts to figure out who gets what, but the construction would be completed. In this case, I'm not sure what happens, so. That's why when I posed a question, I said public/private
Right.
cost.
The Wisconsin law, in specifically section 236.13, which is entitled Basis for Approval, restricts the ability and authority of a city, in this case, to require a letter of credit or other financial security to be posted for the cost of public improvements only. So there is no longer, this statute represents a lot of things, a change in the law, the strength of the lobbyists on behalf of real estate developers, but it's no longer allowed for a city or village to require a letter of credit or financial security to cover the cost of private improvements, like a street in this case.
So, otherwise,
It doesn't really answer the question, what happens, but what you're saying is that we can't do it anyway.
You could
Correct.
not require it for other than public infrastructure and public improvements, no.
Okay.
any other questions or concerns? Alderman Newmeyer?
Are we voting on the addendum? No, the motion is for the.
The motion is for the addendum, the new language, and then to allow 7 business days for the days of inspection and certification of completion of said improvements.
That's the entire issue we're voting on tonight.
Correct, correct.
Thank you.
And the last question I have is on timing, in that last paragraph, Eric, in your memo,
Yes.
timing of the submittal of the letter of credit? Not to the release of it, but to the
Yeah.
submittal of it?
Yeah, the letter of credit's going to be submitted very soon. I'll defer to Attorney Wood. I don't want to put words in her mouth. And I don't know if your question, timing is broader than that, to talk about timing of the anticipated payment to the city. Attorney Wood, are you able to address the timing of either or both of those?
Sure. The letter of credit will have to be posted before we can proceed to do any of the infrastructure work. So we just received the owner letter from the city engineer, so that has to go to the DNR. They will take 6 to 8 weeks before we get approval. At that point, once we have the approvals from the state and the DNR, we will proceed to bid the project. Once we have the final bids in, we can establish the value of the letter of credit, and then we'll be able to obtain a letter of credit, post that, and then proceed with the work. So as soon as the state and DNR get back to us, we can proceed with bidding out and signing contracts and establishing that value for the letter of credit. As far as the lump sum payoff, that has to be made simultaneous with or prior to the initial building permit. I would not anticipate that we start any construction. The earliest would be spring of next year.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further conversations or clarifications? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
All right, motion passes. Was remiss, I blew right over the officers and staff reports there. Rob, did you have anything that you wanted to report on this evening?
I do, thank you. We do have we're probably in the height of our construction season right now. I'll start with the Breakwater Project. Michael's is still on site. They have approximately 3 weeks of work left. So if the weather continues to be favorable as it has been, we're hoping that in 3 weeks we can wrap it up. They've now completed all of the work to the base of the concrete. So the existing concrete base has been completely restored, and now they're laying the walkway itself, the cap, if you will, over the top, and so that they are in the final phase of work there. The railing on the ramp has finally arrived and is being installed this week. I anticipate that'll be completed by Friday. Heart of the Harbor is the base concrete work has been performed. All the electrical is in. The poured base for the fire feature has been installed. We've ordered the sunshade. The site furniture is at our street department and will be at the ready. So we see about 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, again, weather permitting of work down at the Heart of the Harbor project. So the remaining work is essentially the brickwork and then the remaining flat work around the essentially the promenade area and installation of the site furniture and the landscaping. So those are the items that are left, and I really have to say that our street department has really stepped up and done outstanding work out there with minimal direction from me, which is probably the way they want it anyway. So, but they've really done an amazing job and worked well with Main Street, who themselves have done a really great job of putting this together and fundraising. The citywide, I'll call it the citywide, or really the West Side Sidewalk program started this week, started today actually, with saw cutting. So they're saw cutting the joints so that when they remove them, they don't chip the adjoining concrete slab, hopefully. I just got an email from the contractor. He says he's looking at either Thursday or Friday to begin removals. They anticipate only 11 days of removals and replacement. I think it'll be a little more than that, but we're hopeful that in 3 weeks, starting next week, so that'll be completed. So I think we'll be targeting around mid-September. How many square feet? It's 20,000 square feet. So we're looking at, just a little over a thousand square feet a day.
Rob, I know we got the letter about the sidewalk squares are marked.
Yes.
Have they all been marked already?
Well, they've all been marked, but
Some might have washed out.
they've been, you're right. So Ross has been out remarking them. The markings don't last very long. So he's completed everything he said north of Grand Avenue. He's brightened up all those marks. So we'll be heading south of Grand Avenue the rest of the week, brightening those up. So, and kudos to Ross. He's been overseeing a number of projects, that one included. And then, in fact, and then the next the Hales Trails sidewalk project, which should be completed by the end of next week. And so that's been moving right along, and the contractor's been doing a great job on that. And again, we haven't really had any problems. So again, that we have our own crews out there doing the landscaping. Again, we look, weather permitting, to be done by the end of next week.
One question there, Rob. Are there any retaining walls being done there
No, you're talking, no, we're
on
gonna,
Hales Trail?
no, there's only one where we're cutting into the hillside, and so we'll,
That's going to be sloped back?
yep,
Okay.
yeah, I've been in touch with the homeowner. The 2021 street improvement project is about 85% complete. Right now, it's scheduled for paving Saturday and Monday, so that would be the final surface on all the streets. So right now, that's Barry and Cindy. So that, again, should be completed by Monday. We'll see again, weather permitting. And then finally, the Spinnaker West Pond started in earnest a couple of weeks ago. The 3+ inches of rain set them back quite a bit. So they had a dry out period last week. They're not on site this week, but they'll be back next week to work on that project. So, but it's really, even just in the couple of weeks they've been out there, it's been pretty transformational, if you ask me. The wall has not started. It's all been grading work so far. Yeah. Yeah, they could be. I'm guessing that crew is on another site, but also they have to do the utility work. They have to relocate utilities before they can install the wall.
Rob, can I have one more question on this?
Yeah.
Is Sunset Road done? Is that?
Yeah, it's done. The final surface is on. We have to paint a crosswalk on Sunset, and there's some touch-up landscaping. During the big rain event, we had a washout. And if you're referring to the barricades, I've been on them to pick those up.
Okay.
Because they're a mess.
I've actually gotten a couple calls on that.
Yeah,
Girls in the barricades, so.
Supposed
If
to
we
be
could get
picked
those
up.
out of there, that'd be great.
We are working on that, yeah.
Thank you.
I hate to
Any other
ask-
questions for Rob?
That's it, just those 6
Alderman
projects.
Newmeyer?
I hate to be a broken record. Infos, we're any farther on getting that hooked up?
You know, I don't know I'll have to get back to you on
Okay,
that.
I had a
We're-
question from a constituent, so I'm just kind of wondering.
Right, so I was not aware. So the info system is down because the electrical, which is run from our wastewater plant, essentially came apart when we had a failure of the EFIS system, which was not installed correctly when it was installed in the 90s. And
Thank
so
you.
we're making those corrections.
Any other questions or clarifications for the city engineer? All right. Mr. Harris?
Well, in contrast to the city engineer, I have none tonight.
I took his time.
Yes. There will be a Snicker bar in your mailbox tomorrow. All right, city clerk's report. We'll get to the miniature ones for you and Rob,
Oh, all right.
of course.
Very briefly, just an update. I think you all are aware now that the U.S. Census data has been delivered. There was debate over whether it was going to arrive this week or next week, but we've been waiting since the beginning of spring. So it did arrive and was dropped in yesterday. I was on a meeting today, call with the county, with Jason, the administrator. He was reviewing where the county is at this point. He will be discussing this during the county board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. What I did hand out was the basic local redistricting timeline. Now, there's different levels, obviously. It comes down from the state, the state level, the counties, and the municipal. So in our case, our portion of this is strictly our wards. That's what we work on. That's what we focus on within the criteria we're given to balance the wards within 10% or less of each other, taking into consideration future growth with subdivisions potentially that will be coming within the next 10-year period. Get out our crystal ball and do the best we can do. Within the wards, that balance also affects aldermanic districts. The goal is always to keep, if possible, the districts aligned with the wards. Sometimes that doesn't work, and then which would only affect maybe a spring election where we would have to have multiple ballots in one ward if we had districts that overlap. When it came to the city, that was the case. The districts were not in alignment with the wards. They did overlap. When we did the 2010 census, I was able to align everything so the wards and districts were together. So obviously, ideally, you would like to do that. I think the county feels as well, they don't anticipate much of a shift in, if any, in their supervisory districts. They want to keep them as close to the same as possible because it doesn't appear at first glance to them like there needs to be any large adjustments. I don't, other than some minor adjustments to our ward lines to accommodate for growth, I don't anticipate much change either. Within this program, in 2010, we worked with large maps and literally pencils with erasers and a calculator and worked out our voting numbers. This is all in a large, very detailed computer program now, which is just amazing. It does all the calculating as you move the lines so that you can, and it gives you the percentages and tells you whether you are meeting the criteria, which is set by the federal government. And the formulas are all embedded within that. So what I plan to do is there's some more launch meetings coming, but to look at this, stage 0 and 1, the census block is delivered to the county, which has happened. So now they're going to stage 1, where the county will work on their supervisory districts. Ron Voigt, Register of Deeds Office, will be assisting with that and working with Jason. They will be reviewing all that when they're done creating the tentative districts, then they go to stage 2. So I'm going to give you this is the preliminary dates that they're working with. This may change. So the county wants to get their portion done by September 15th. We're obviously having to move quickly because instead of having from March to December, we now have September to December 1st to get this entire thing done from our level all the way to the state complete, and then it goes to the Wisconsin Election Commission, who has to work with all of the addressing, district combinations in the entire state to make sure it works with the voter records, the election, and they have to update the entire program. So this is going to be a fast track for sure. So stage 2, it comes to, oh, I'm sorry.
Is that a result of statutory timelines?
Yes. So
Is your clerks association asking for?
they've been discussing things all along with them.
Yeah, nothing better than rushing this.
Did go to court. There was a proposed delay to push it into 2022. And then there was discussion of whether we could do part of it in 21 and part of it in 22, but that would have required the municipalities to submit and then redo all the work in 22. And it would have been like completing it twice. I think the goal would be, they want to have this done before they go into the governor's election year, which is next year. This is the beginning of our next 6 election cycle for a year and a half. So that's why this is done in what we call the off year, where there's only 2 elections, to allow time to get that redistricting completed. So this is really condensing this substantially. So for stage 2, then once the county is done, then it comes to us. This is part of the guidelines and dates that we follow. Then that's when we work in the system. We try to make sure that our wards are balanced. We get our census blocks reviewed, our population counts with the voting population. Then they want that done by October 8th. So then it goes back to the county for stage 3. They reconcile their supervisory districts and our municipal wards to make sure everything aligns properly. There's no gaps. It has to be contiguous and there's no overlap. And at that point, the automatic districts come into play to see whether they're aligned properly and that meets the criteria. So stage 3, the county and the municipality actually work together to finalize and reconcile. That goal is by October 15th to have that stage done. And public hearings have to be held. The county would like final adoption by November 3rd, and the absolute deadline is December 1st. So it's an aggressive timeline, but I think it's going to help that we have this computer program that will assist us in being able to make sure that we meet all the criteria and we keep the lines contiguous within. I don't feel that there'll be large changes. As I said, I think there might be some small shifts to accommodate for changes in population, but the goal is to not make any radical changes. That's our small portion. We really don't have any control over the county's districting, the state. We just work within our own small piece of this larger puzzle. As I get a little farther along, we have our preliminary meetings. There is data that I will definitely send you with links that you will be able to actually view what this program looks like and can get into it and actually see how it functions and how you can work within that to change what's necessary. And then the clerks all have been given their confidential credentials, and at the end, we'll all, including the county clerk as well, will submit the final onto the state. And then it's up to them to finish their portion of it. That's really a fast overview on a complicated situation. So
Susan, you're not expecting any really major changes in the boundaries for the districts?
no. My goal is to keep them as close to the same as they are, with just maybe some small variations. The way we have them now, Grand Avenue, Wisconsin, Spring, these are our major ward line splits. And once, ideally, we like to keep those major streets. It helps the poll workers as well, and all of us work within the ward blocks that we do for registration and things like that. And then, obviously, if you do too much shifting, that may change automatic lines and automatic seats. And we want to avoid doing any of that if possible. So that's my goal.
I think, any other questions for Susan?
I think
one of the nice-
chocolate bar.
I think, yeah, you're going to get a Snicker. You'll get a king size. I think one of the interesting pieces is that Port Washington significantly exceeded the county levels of growth as a community, and that's something we need to be cognizant of as we move forward with our strategic plan. That we are a growing community, and that's good for our schools and good for us. So we're doing something right. Good luck with all of that.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Now, moving back into the agenda, we are now on item number 7 from Standing Council Committees, Finance and Licensing Committee. We have a report on financing 2021 water utility projects.
It's Carol Worth show tonight.
Yes, we've got a lot on here. So our staff recommendation is to the council permit staff to continue working with Wisconsin Public Finance Professionals LLC to complete the 2021 debt issuance. Mr. Brown, introduction, or she can just go, friend of the council.
Hey, I think Alderman Pleitner correctly pointed out this is the Carol Worth show for the next half an hour to hour.
All in favor signify by aye.
All right, thank you. Okay, we're going to try and make it interesting so no one falls asleep. How's that? All right, we're going to start with the report on the water utility financing projects. I'm going to move through it rather quickly. This is a report that is prepared in the same format as the last time I appeared before you, which was for sewer utility projects. So starting on page 2, it mentions that we are financing the water capital projects with revenue bonds under the Chapter 66 of the statutes. They will be tax-exempt municipal securities, long-term securities. We are also going to talk about some taxables. Revenue bonds do allow the city to commingle the funds between projects, unlike the general obligation statute that does not. They can be issued for up to a maximum of 40 years, which we are not going to be doing, but that's your maximum. They are repaid with revenues from the rates generated by the utility itself. There is no tax levy supporting those debt service payments, and they are also secured by a reserve fund, which is necessary because there is no tax levy support, and if revenues did not materialize, there needs to be another level of payment. Okay, so that's basically the overall statute for revenue bonds. Page number 3, we are going to be talking about, we're going to call it, for this exercise, 2 separate projects. Project number 1 is 2021 capital projects, which are listed there as water main replacements, street and meter replacements, utility truck, SCADA system, and we're going to remove the reference to the creek restoration. And the grand total for projects is $2.1 million. The second number 2 project is the associated with the conditions assessment report that was prepared for the water utility. And that is a report that anticipates approximately $15 million of improvements. The city is planning to apply to both the Safe Drinking Water Loan Program and to the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, okay, for long-term financing, and that would be 30-plus years in order to amortize that. Okay, so however, the city is currently experiencing engineering design costs associated with that project. And right now that is about $915,000 of costs. So in order to take advantage of the design and engineering costs being treated as part of the overall project budget for the $15 million, we're going to do some interim financing to supply the city with the $915,000 that's needed right now. So we're going to use a revenue bond anticipation note. It's going to be short term, and it's going to be refinanced with one of the other programs that will take it out as long-term permanent financing and as part of the overall $15 million project. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the following page about the revenue bonds, which is the long-term, and the revenue bands, which is the short-term. So the 21 revenue bonds is going to provide for the capital projects, expenses of issuance, and to fund that reserve requirement. They're going to be 15-year bonds. The approximate size to provide for all of those purposes is $2,240,000. It is subject to change. And we will be applying for a Moody's bond rating on that financing. Existing water revenue bonds are rated A1 by Moody's. The second one is a revenue band, and again, for those engineering design costs. And the approximate size is going to be $965,000 subject to change, because that is also going to fund, in addition to those design costs, expenses of issuance and capitalized interest. All of those are eligible as a project cost for the other long-term financing options. The revenue bands will be a 2.5-year short-term financing, and they will have a prepayment option in May of 2023, which is going to coincide with the construction timetable and the long-term financing. The short-term Moody's bond rating that will be applied for will be known as a Moody's investment grade rating. So they're called a MIG rating rather than the letter grade of A1. You'll see it'll be a MIG 1 or MIG 2. That's used for short terms. And the revenue bands are going to be issued as a taxable security rather than tax exempt. And that's being done to preserve the city's $10 million limit of tax exempt debt for the bank qualified auction. Now, when we look at the general obligation refunding bonds that we're going to be doing, the sewer revenue bonds and these water revenue bonds, we're getting close to that. And those are all long-term permanent financing. So we want to make sure we can do all of them as tax exempt bank qualified, because that's where you will receive the lowest interest rate possible. So keeping this very short-term financing taxable, there's hardly any difference, if at all, between a tax exempt and a taxable rate. So it's better to designate them taxable. The water system itself has 3 outstanding revenue bonds of approximately $6 million. And the 21 revenue bonds and bands, both of them, will be issued on what's called a parity basis with them. That means all of the bondholders, including these new bondholders, will have equal claim to the revenues of the water system. Okay, which is a good position to be in for marketing bonds, because if you did not have that position, you'd be doing something called a junior lien bond, and then that you have a more expensive interest rate associated with that. So all of these will be on an equal basis. So now we're going to be looking at a couple of sources and uses of funds, which is on the next page. And the top part is the water revenue bonds, and we're looking at 3 sources, and that's the amount of bonds we're talking about issuing, $2,240,000, premium from investors, which is an estimate, and the existing reserve account. Okay, that's $582,000. What are we going to do with that money? We're going to apply it to the uses of funds. Well, there's an estimate for expenses that the underwriter would be responsible for paying. Again, that's hopefully a conservative estimate. The deposit to the new reserve account, the calculation that's done, and that's, again, under federal tax law, at this point is showing a $721,000 new reserve fund. So that will bring it to the legal requirement. And then the deposit to the project construction fund of that $2.1 million, and then some rounding. The revenue band is, again, just the band proceeds is the source of fund, and then that's broken down for, again, underwriters, expenses paid by the city, capitalized interest, and then the deposit to the construction fund and some rounding. Okay. Now, if there's any more premium than what is shown on the sources and uses of funds, then that's where the issue size would go down. So that's why they're all subject to change. And I'll be, coming back to you with the results of the actual sale. And so if you see a different number, you're going to know why. Okay. Page 6 is the estimated payment schedule for the $2,240,000 bonds. So you'll see the columns of principal on May 1, rates, which are estimated interest generated by those rates, and then the combined column for the 21 bonds, estimated debt service. You're also going to see to the right of that the existing water debt service. And you'll notice that the first number is $715,000, and then it drops to the $568 level. So now if we move to the column to the right of that, the combined estimated debt service starts at $715 and goes to $713 and so on. So we're going to be adding this new debt and maintaining the same level of debt service. So your debt service will not be increasing. And you'll see that there will be a decline in the year 2032. There will also be a prepayment option in the year 2030. So if for some reason in your future there is a reason to stretch out the bonds, you certainly statutorily have the ability, and you have a call feature that gives you that flexibility. Okay. The estimated true interest rate is right now 1.96, but based on things that are selling in the market, issues selling in the market today, this week, yields on the longer term are dropping again. So if you were selling today, I would expect that we would have come in even less than that 1.96. Okay, so we will be monitoring that. The monitoring is on page 7. This is a pricing schedule. And again, the yield column is what is the market. And that's the column we will be monitoring. So as I mentioned today, those yields are lower than what you're seeing on this page. And those yields and the premium and so on is what's generating that last number on the page at the very bottom, the true interest cost of that 1.96%. Okay? All right, then the next page is the same exercise for the revenue bands, which in this case, they're taxable. I'm showing a coupon or an interest rate of a 0.75, which I believe is very conservative at this point in time. It also shows the principal on May 1, estimated interest, total estimated debt service, and then it shows to the right of that capitalized interest, which means that this issue is providing for those interest payments. So there will not be a draw on the water utility revenues as a result of their issuance. Okay, and then below that is the pricing schedule. Again, the coupon and the yield column are exactly the same. Again, based on today's current market rates, I would expect that to be lower. And if that's lower, the capitalized interest need is going to be lower and the whole issue size comes down. Okay, so that's the relationship. The true interest cost at the bottom, which reflects a 0.94, and the reason for that is because that's taking into account the expenses for the underwriter that becomes part of that calculation on a taxable, because there's nothing there's no premium on this one. So, all right. Moving on to the last page, the timeline for the financing. After tonight's presentation, the next step would be council action at your September 7th meeting on what's called parameters resolutions. There will be one for each issue. And I will be explaining other parameters resolutions tonight, so you will be able to follow those when you receive those in your packets for the September 7th meeting. It's a form of an award resolution. Then we are preparing the financing documents, and we are also in communication with Quarles and Brady, your bond counsel, to prepare the legal documents and the resolutions necessary. We are also preparing for the rating. We plan to have that rating call mid-September. We plan to take bids in the marketplace around September 29th. And that's where the city administrator, under the parameters resolution, would then have the authority to award those bonds to the winning bidder. The closing and all of the funds would be delivered to the city on October 15th and then distributed according to that sources and uses of funds that we've seen in the report. Okay. All right. Made it through. Look at that.
I'm excited for when Tony gets to award the bonds. I see it kind of like Oprah's show, right? You get a bond and you get a bond.
That's right. There, he'll be a popular man, I'll tell you that.
On that day, he will. Any questions on this agenda item before we get into the resolution highway here? Okay.
All right.
I just have a process question, Tony and Carol. With all of these different resolutions, do you want, are we going to take these, obviously we have to motion piece by piece on them, but do you want to report on all of them at once? How have you done this in the past?
I don't
Whatever you
frankly
would
know
like.
if the city's had multiple resolutions like this in the past. So, I mean, if
Be
we,
it resolved
if
and
we could go through all of them at once, and then come back to each item one by one, I
Yeah,
think that'd be the preference.
we could do
Just
that.
after having read the packet,
Yeah.
they're sequential and they don't make sense they don't make sense. They're not necessarily sensical individually, but I think the whole narrative would
Some
help
of them
us.
are tied to each other, so
Right.
it would be able to be very simple to
Right, so if
do
there's
them
no
all at
objection
once.
from council, then if you wouldn't mind,
Yeah.
5-10 minutes to go through that, and then we'll go through each resolution
Yep.
with appropriate action as
Yep.
needed.
And I think what we can do here is go individually by each issue, Carol.
Yes,
And then once we're done with each issue, the mayor
bring it
if he
back, yep.
would, yeah, bring it back to the action items.
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
okay. All right, let's do it.
So the
Okay.
next agenda item then is going to be the staff recommendation to engage WPFP for $965,000 for water systems. And then the second agenda item as well is to the scope of engagement. So go ahead.
Okay, all right, so first item, the municipal advisory agreement is the agreement between the city and our firm for our scope of services and the fee associated with each financing, and this is prepared in the exact same format. They are issue specific, and so every time we do come to the city with a financing, we have to, under our regulations, provide this. So the similar format as you have seen recently in the other issues. Okay. Next one. All right. I take it that we are looking at the resolution authorizing the issuance and establishing parameters. Okay. And that is for the sale. This is a parameters resolution, so we're going to go through some of the basics on here, and then the rest of the parameters resolutions are going to be very simple to follow. Okay. So one thing you're going to notice, I'm going to go right to the title. It says that it's for the sale of not to exceed. So it's a not to exceed number. It's establishing these parameters so that when we do go into the marketplace, we cannot sell more than $1,735,000 of sewer system revenue bonds. Okay, this is the sewer system now. We just talked about water. We're back to sewer. All right. So moving down through the bottom of the page, the last whereas. Okay, I'm going to point out the parameters. This whereas is giving, the council is giving the authority to the city administrator to accept an award on behalf of the city, the bids for the bonds that result in the lowest true interest cost to the city. Okay, so that's one condition. Next page, section 1. First paragraph, last sentence. The next thing that is a parameter is the purchase price. This is how much, this is a bidding parameter that myself and the bond counsel discuss and is put out into the marketplace so that the underwriter knows how to place the bid. So they must bid it for not less than 100%, which is $1,735,000, or not more than 104%. Okay, they can bid anywhere in between that. And then the next parameter is under section 2, which says that each principal amount, or they call it a maturity, can be increased or decreased by $25,000. Well, why do we say that? Well, it's because if you get a lot of premium, if you get up to that 104%, the only way you're going to get up there is with premium. If you get that premium, we can reduce those principal amounts. Each one won't be more of a change than $25,000. We could reduce one and increase one. Okay, we can do it by 5,000, 10,000, whatever. So that gives you that flexibility. The very bottom of page 2 is the final parameter. The very last sentence on that page is that the true interest rate will not exceed 3.25%. Well, we know that at this point in time, it won't even exceed 2%, all right? So when it comes time to awarding the bonds on the day of that the bids are taken, what happens is that I verify the bids that they're in compliant with this. That information goes to Quarles and Brady. They verify that that is compliant with the parameters. A certificate is prepared by Quarles and Brady called an approving certificate. It goes to your city administrator and says, everybody's checked on this, it's compliant. You can feel comfortable in signing that approving certificate awarding the bonds to the bidder, okay? So this is direction to the city administrator, and then he gets confirmation in that way. Now, going back to the resolution, the rest of this resolution is what I would call a pretty standard revenue bond resolution. It sets out terms, it sets out funds and accounts of the sewer utility, it sets out the flow of funds and coverage ratios and on and on and on. Okay, so that's very standard and typical. So, you know, I don't want to rush through too quickly, but it also would take an awful long time to go through the whole thing. One thing I did bring, and, you know, I gave everybody a packet of information. If you unclip that information, and there is a page that has just a single page that has this yellow mark at the top. And the reason I did that is because I asked Quarles and Brady to make a change to the resolution that you have in your agenda packet. And the change I made is highlighted. At the bottom, you'll see the highlight says bond anticipation notes on page 8. And then on page 9, it has a highlight for a paragraph that talks about the coverage ratio and balloon maturities. And the reason I asked for that change is because we just talked about we're doing revenue bands for the water. Those revenue bands are issued on a parity basis. That means they're sharing, the bondholders have equal claim to the revenues, just like the revenue bonds. If we didn't put this section in here, we wouldn't be able to do that for the sewer utility. I want to give the city as much option flexibility into the future that if you ever do issue sewer revenue bands, you have that same flexibility as you do on the water. So again, I didn't want to give you a whole new resolution, but this page does change what you're acting on tonight. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. Okay? That's it for the parameters resolution. Okay? All right. You want to move on? All right, next item. No questions? Quarles and Brady. Quarles and Brady, just like, you know, we have a municipal advisory agreement with the city for our services, Quarles and Brady has a scope of engagement services for their activities related to each financing, and it's issue specific. So you'll see this is their scope of engagement for the $1,735,000. It again recites their scope of services and their fee. Okay, so that's what we are presenting there in number 4. Okay, then moving on. There is a resolution that is titled a resolution authorizing the redemption of sewer system revenue refunding bonds from 2012, right? What this is, the council is authorizing is that you have 2012 revenue bonds outstanding. They have 2 payments remaining, one on December 1 of 2021 and one on December 1 of 2022. If you look at the second page of this resolution, there is a notice of call. The reason that we are suggesting that you call them in and pay them off is because we are going to convert your new sewer revenue bonds to a payment date cycle of May 1 and November 1, which is a requirement if you were going to apply for Clean Water Fund loan. And that gets away from this junior lien bond status, which everybody's going to get a little bit concerned about when it happens. So you're at a great point right now where you can extinguish the old revenue bond resolution by paying them off. So you're going to pay them off with money that your sewer utility has on hand for the December 1 of 21 payment already. And then you have a reserve fund for that 2012 issue. So you're going to use the reserve fund to pay off the 22 principal amount. Okay, so that's the purpose of the reserve fund, is to apply it to the last payment when you get there. So we finally got there on this issue, so that's where the money's coming from to pay this off. So it requires council action to tell the bondholders that we're going to call in their bonds on October 1 of 21. We're going to stop their interest payment. And we have to give them a minimum of 30-day notice. We have to do that and get rid of those bonds by October 1 so that the new sewer bonds will close on October 6th. And we have then the legal authority to proceed with the new sewer bonds with a brand new clean resolution. Okay? So that's what's going on with that resolution.
Yeah, that's a pretty good spot for us to stop right there.
Okay.
And then back up if any council members have any questions, and then we can kind of take those motions through those 5 different resolutions. Alderman Sigwart?
The $10 million limit
Yes,
on the tax-free bonds,
yes.
is that a percentage of the assessed value of the city, or is that a statutory?
That's a federal arbitrage rule. That's set by federal tax law.
Regardless of whether you have small city, big city, or?
That's right.
Right, okay.
That's correct. They were trying to get that increase for years up to 30 million, and they thought it might have happened this year, but right now there's no language in any legislation that increases. But they've been trying to get that increased to 30 million for years, so we're still living with 10 million.
That's like a grant to the city.
Well, it's definitely just, small issuers that are going to be able to take advantage of that because, your larger cities, I mean, you're talking, hundreds of millions of dollars of issuance each time they're out there. Yeah.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we would be moving to the staff recommendation of going back to the first resolution there. Consideration and action on municipal advisory agreement for $965,000 for water system revenue bond anticipation notes and 2.2 million water system revenue bonds. Jonathan?
Yep.
Or, I'm sorry, Alderman Pleitner.
Yep, absolutely. No, we, all Finance and License Committee did recommend approval of these actions downstairs. So I would recommend that we approve, I would move to approve the agreement with Wisconsin Finance Professionals for the issue of the $965,000 of water system revenue bond anticipation bonds and $2.25 million for the water system revenue bonds.
So I have a motion. I'm sorry, Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of clarification, and this is an incorrect amount. The 2.25 should be 2.4.
2.24.
2.25. 5? 4.
2.25, that's what it is. So is it
Double check.
is it supposed to be $2,240,000 or $2,250,000? $2,240,000.
2.24.
Okay,
Thanks for the clarification.
$2,240,000 is the revised part of your motion?
Yes, it
Alderman
is.
Pleitner?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Alderman Postle. Questions or concerns about that motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, that motion passes. Second resolution then is a resolution authorizing the issuance and establishing parameters for a sale of not to exceed $1,735,000 sewer system revenue bonds for Series 2021 of the City of Port Washington, Ozaukee County, providing for the payment of the bonds and other details with respect to those bonds. Alderman Pleitner.
I would move to approve Resolution 2021-9.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I will second.
Seconded by Alderman Postle. Any questions or concerns about the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Excellent. The next one is a consideration of possible action on scope of engagement with Quarles and Brady LLP for issuance of $1,735,000 of sewer system revenue bonds, Series 2021 for the City of Port Washington, Wisconsin. Alderman Pleitner.
I would move to approve to enter into a sort of engagement with Quarles and Brady.
Is there a second for that motion?
I will second.
Second by Alderwoman Postle. Any questions or concerns about the motions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Seeing none, the motion passes. All right, we are now on to agenda item 5, resolution authorizing the redemption of a sewer system revenue refunding bonds, Series 2012, dated November 1st. Staff recommends the council approve the scope of engagement. right? Am I on track here? Or we can take that motion, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I would move to approve Resolution 2021-10.
There's a motion by Alderman Pleitner. Is there a second?
I will second.
Second by Alderwoman Postle.
Just have a quick question, Mayor.
Yes.
What was the interest rate on those at that time?
On the second page, the interest rates are listed right there.
22222.
Okay.
So again, yeah, you're going to save a little bit of interest by paying them off on October 1. Very well known, $7,000 or something. But the whole purpose of calling them in is to be allowed to get rid of the outstanding resolution and start with a brand new resolution so we can change that payment cycle date for the May 1, November 1, like the other long-term funding programs are.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. I'm going to call for action. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Okay, now 6, 7, and 8, and 9. And 7 has always been afraid of 8. Math teacher joke.
All right. This is, again, the handout that I gave you. This was not something that you had before because this is a sale report that took place today. So this is brand new information. It is tied to the resolution, but the handout also includes a new resolution. And the only difference in the resolution that you currently have in your agenda packet and this resolution is that it includes the exhibits, which is the result of today's sale. So I'm going to run through. We took bids this morning. This is the two-phase financing plan that we talked about back in July for the city's 21 capital improvement projects. Okay, and you may recall that the reason we are doing this two-step process is so that we can go beyond 10 years to repay it. We can't use the bonding statute for general obligation bonds because it does not allow you to commingle funds between projects. So in order to accomplish that, you need to do the two-step process, which is a very short-term note called a note anticipation note, or a NAN. And in this case, it's very short. It's like 2.5 months. And it's just out there long enough for us to prepare to do the takeout, which is going to be 12 years refunding bonds. So, so today we went and took bids, competitive bids for the note anticipation notes. And you will see, we went to market with the same type of things, the official statement, which is the booklet that I gave everyone. We did not go through a rating. This is too short for a rating. So we took the bids and we received 3 bids. And you can see at the bottom of page 1 of the handout, the winning bid was submitted by Piper Sandler and Company out of New York. We also had 2 bids from firms out of Pennsylvania. So the true interest rate is 0.524%. Okay, so that's great news. And by the way, these were taxable interest rate, all right? Again, we did that same thing. We made these taxable to preserve that bank qualified limit, all right? So just to keep the comparison between why we're doing taxables and tax exempts, you can see where this one came in. All right, page 2 is the top of the page is, again, now the sources and uses of funds. What are we doing with this money with the sale results, right? We issued $5,035,000. We got about $8,900 of premium from this bid. And the uses of funds, the underwriter is getting paid. The city's going to pay other costs of issuance out of these funds. There's going to be about $5,006,530 deposited for construction for capital improvement projects. And then there's going to be $10,489 put aside to pay the interest on the NANs. Okay, so the principal is being refinanced, the interest is provided for. So right below that is the calculation of how it was bid. It was bid at 1% interest rate, and of course, the premium that was received by the city from the underwriter brought that rate down to that 0.52%. And that is showing in the pricing schedule there. You see the yield column? That's what the investor got, 0.15%, right? Taxable. So that's why you'll see the sale generated $5,043,911, and that's the difference of bringing it down to that true interest cost of the 0.52%. Council action on the resolution that's attached is approving the borrowing terms, locking in the interest rate, awarding the NANs to Piper Sandler, and it's authorizing also general obligation promissory notes to refund those NANs, which, by the way, we're going to be doing general obligation refunding bond, which is fine. It's different statute, but that's appropriate. And we'll do that, of course, no later than November 15th when the NANs come due. Closing is August 30th. The city is going to receive all the money, and it's going to distribute it according to how we described it under the uses of funds. Okay. Page number 3 is just a refresher of the same information that was in the July 6th report for step 2. This is the expected repayment for those refunding bonds, the 12-year amortization. So this is how we're going to go out to the market with this structure. The estimated true interest rate is 1.59%. And again, based on what's going on in the markets today, it would come in below that. The parameters resolution that we're also going to be talking about is, again, going to be something that the council is going to take action on tonight. And that is going to designate the city administrator to award those bonds on the day that we take bids. And again, it will contain those same parameters in that resolution. So, you know, the council action tonight on that parameters resolution, sale about September 15th, closing October 15th, so that the NANs could be paid off on November 15th. Okay. The resolution that's attached, again, same resolution that is in your agenda packets, no difference. For the first, and then the pages are numbered at the bottom, so the pages through page 7 is identical and is pretty much a standard award resolution that the council has adopted for any of its general obligation financings. That is now, this resolution contains the exhibits that were not included in your agenda packet. So this is what makes it the final. You'll see the official notice of sale, which is what we distributed into the marketplace to take bids. That is a 4-page document. That is followed by Exhibit B, which is the bid tabulation, which showing the 3 bids, which you've seen in the summary, followed by Exhibit C, which is the bid form that shows you how the underwriters placed their bid, and it will be executed by the mayor and clerk pending your approval tonight. Exhibit D is the debt service schedule, which you've already seen. Exhibit E is the form of note, which is a template for the actual bonds that will be prepared for this issue. All right. Okay. All right.
You can keep on going right through the
Okay.
Quarles and Brady piece.
All right, Quarles and Brady, same document. Scope of services specific to this $5,035,000 note anticipation notes. Okay, again, states their scope of services, states their fee, but specific to this issue. Okay? All right. Moving on to the next resolution, which is titled Resolution Authorizing Issuance and Establishing Parameters for Sale of Not to Exceed $5,050,000 General Obligation Refunding Bonds. Okay, I asked Bond Counsel to give us a little cushion on this just in case market conditions are changing such that we don't have to cancel sale for something if it gets down to, because you can't use well, yes, you can use premium in this case for debt service. Well, that's the reason why we just went to that number. I think realistically with the amount of premium that's being bid nowadays, we're probably going to come back to you with an issue size under $5 million in reality. That's why it's a not to exceed number, but I do think you'll be under $5 million. The fifth whereas on this page is delegating the authority to your city administrator to accept those bids and to award the bonds subject to the parameters included in this resolution. The bottom of page 1, section 1, very last sentence. The parameters for the bidder, 100%, not more than 103%. Okay? page 2. First paragraph, section 2, may increase or decrease those principal amounts, which right now is structured as a $5,035,000 issue. So we can change those around to meet the city's goals. And again, the paragraph right underneath that principal amount is not to exceed interest rate of 3%, which we know right now is going to be 1.5% or under based on current market conditions. So we should be safe with that. The rest of the resolution is a standard award resolution, setting the term of the bonds, the call features, tax levy requirements, and so on. Okay? All right, moving on. The next document, again, should be a scope of engagement for Quarles and Brady for this $5 million refunding bond issue. Okay, so again, issue specific to the refunding bonds. They typically will put out their scope of engagement anytime they put out the resolution. So that's why you're seeing all of these coming together. So same format, scope of services and fee specific to the refunding bonds, which we are preparing for. Okay? All right. I think we're done. All right.
I do have one request, though, before we hammer through these resolutions, and that is a final question is when this is over with all these different issuances, would it be possible for the council, for us to just get a simple single page of this is what you authorized and then this is what it was?
Yep, I prepare, like today I gave you that summary of sale report.
Sure.
I'm going to prepare a document like that with maybe 1 or 2 pages for each one of these,
Okay, okay,
always. Yep.
thank you.
If you want, I can combine that into one document that shows.
No.
Okay.
No extra work. We can read it. Unless, of course, the council would like it. Okay, so here we go. Going back to the resolution, so number 6 here, Resolution 2021-11, authorizing the issuance of $5,035,000 in general obligation promissory notes and the issuance of and sale of $5,035,000 taxable note anticipation notes in anticipation thereof.
I move to approve Resolution 2021-11.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Alderwoman Postle, any questions or concerns on the motion or the piece? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Consideration and possible action on scope of engagement with Quarles and Brady LLP for issuance of that $5,035,000 of taxable note anticipation notes for the city of Port Washington, Wisconsin.
I move to enter into a scope of engagement with Quarles and Brady.
Is there a second on the motion?
I will second.
Second by Alderwoman Postle. Any questions or concerns on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Resolution 2021-12, authorizing the issuance and establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed $5,050,000 general obligation refunding bonds.
I move to approve Resolution 2021-12.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
It is seconded. Any questions or concerns on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and consideration and possible action on scope of engagement with Quarles and Brady LLP for issuance of those $5,050,000 general obligation refunding bonds. Alderman Pleitner.
I move to enter into a scope of engagement with Quarles and Brady.
Alderwoman Postle.
I second.
Just predicting it. Any questions or concerns on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. I want to thank you very much for your diligence for the city of Port Washington and our citizens in different ways that you found efficiencies here through those different lending options and pieces, and the Finance Committee for all the time and effort in reading the just shy of 1.7 million pages of information that we were given. So I'm grateful for that diligence on your behalf. So thank you, and thank you on behalf of our community.
Oh,
this
thank
is good
you
work.
so much. All right, thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 10, consideration and Thank you, Mrs. Knightsky. You're coming in September.
It depends if you want me here in September. September 7th would be the adoption of the parameters resolution for the water issues. That's all that would be on that agenda. Okay, there won't be any sale results to give you. At that time, it'll just be the 2 parameters resolutions for the water issue. And now that you're an expert in reading parameters resolutions,
Carol,
those are the only 2 things.
And the issuances of NANs.
And nans and bans.
Yeah.
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 You're doing them all.
Right.
You're using
Those are
every
u-
statute imaginable, nans, bans,
These
notes,
are all
bonds,
usable on a
refunding.
Scrabble board.
Yes.
Alderman Benning, did you have a question?
Carol, that parameters document will be very similar to what we saw, except the dates and the amounts.
Exactly. It'll have those parameters in those same places in the first and second page, just like I pointed out. And I can also draft a little cheat sheet for you on that. But that's, we've got a lot of things going on with, we have to do rating calls, and the timing on these things is very ambitious. And, but we're going to be, I will be in City Hall frequently because we also are going to have a stack of closing documents for every one of these financings. And I will be here with those documents and coordinating signatures of the mayor and clerk and city administrator and probably some city treasurer. So, and rating calls and on and on and on. So I will be here frequently.
Mr. Brown?
I was just going to say that in light of that fact, I think I'm confident we can go through the parameters resolutions without Carol being in attendance.
Okay, you got it.
But in all seriousness, the diligence you do in your work with our administrative team and the finance department to, find us efficiencies is, we value that, so thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. It means a lot.
Okay. All right, now that we just spent millions of dollars, reissued it, and figured out different ways to do that, let's move on to something a little different. Consideration and possible action on a one-day extension of alcohol premises during the J3 race event for Inventors Pub at 435 North Lake Street. Ms. Westerbeek.
This particular request is from Inventors Brew Pub. They currently have a Class B combination alcohol license, which covers beer and wine. They want to extend the sales connected to their current location, but out into the parking lot to the north during the J3 race event that will be held that day. This would allow them to sell, serve, and the consumption of beer and wine in plastic cups only in the designated area from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on that date. So this has been done previously in 2019 for this particular event. They've completed everything that they need to with their request. Their map was included. We've had no issues before with this request, nor with the race event that's been run there before. So it went to Finance License Committee prior to this.
I would move to approve.
There's a motion to
Second.
approve. Is there a second? There's a second by Alderman Benning. Any questions or concerns about the the alcohol permit? Sorry, I was hung up on the 9 a.m. start time of beer serving. Yeah, it's like a fraternity party after going to the farmer's market, I guess.
Absolutely.
All right, so anyways, there's a motion and a second. Is there any questions or concerns about the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, the motion is approved. Next agenda item, we have Ms. Westerbeek back, is the required documents were submitted and approved by the city. The consideration of possible action on extension of alcohol on the premises of the outdoor music series at Javadoc, our neighbor at 116 West Grand Avenue. Staff recommendation is requesting a motion to approve the extension of alcohol premises for Javadoc Cafe for an outdoor music series on the dates designated in their request as presented.
This is similar, other than it is not a one-day premise extension request. You'll see in the proposal that she sent in, there are numerous dates, which are all Saturdays and/or Sundays. So this will include their new license that's been issued, which will include beer and wine, plastic cups only, in that area as designated, in the dates that appear in their petition from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., along with music, which has also been covered by their annual cabaret license, so that's already approved. Does anybody have any questions?
I would move to approve.
Motion to approve,
Second.
second by Alderman Benning. Any questions or concerns on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Seeing none, it passes. Susan, I just wanted to thank you for your work with them. As our neighbor here at City Hall, I think that Javadoc does a nice job in providing a service and helping extend the downtown here a little west on Grand Avenue, and they were very pleased with your work with them. Now, moving on to boards and commission, planning commission, number 1 here, public hearing on the conditional use grant for a proposed automotive detailing service at 922 North Wisconsin Street. Scott Nelson and Mason Barnett are the applicants. Staff recommendation is the use is not in question, given the zoning code language and the long history with automotive uses at the site. However, pertinent site improvements should be consistent with the previous automotive-related conditional use requests earlier this year. Mr. Harris.
Prior to this action, I think there is a public hearing to be held.
Well, that's correct. I'm sorry. 7:30. Yeah, it's 7:30. I'd like to call it with a public hearing. Is there anyone who'd like to speak in favor? Anyone who'd like to speak in favor? Yeah, you need to make sure to sign in. If you want to speak in favor, you can do that now.
Should I speak in favor of myself or?
This is really the opportunity for the public, neighbors, et cetera. If you want to speak, you can speak, but,
I'll wait my turn.
okay. Is there anyone who'd like to speak against? Seeing none, the hearing is closed. I apologize for the jumping to letter number 2 there. Now we will move to a consideration and possible action on the conditional use grant for a proposed automotive detailing service. And I've already read Bob's recommendation. So Bob, you're up.
So I will just jump into the quick summary of the conditional use request. And I also note this is Mr. Mason Barnett. He is the business owner of the detailing business, and he'll be available for questions after my summary. Just real quick, all of you are familiar with the site at 922 North Wisconsin. And let me put up on the screen my maps and aerials that I have in my packet. So here is the subject property. A lot of these issues and items came up from the previous automotive request earlier this year or late last year. And again, you can see, there is the issue of the, kind of the confounding property lines, which going off of the property lines, apparently a section of northbound North Wisconsin Avenue is driving through private property, and hence this was the one of the reasons, biggest reason for one of the conditions is a certified survey map to clean up this Byzantine property line issue and make it one complete lot. And then this is the site plan for the property. And as I noted in my report, it should be, given the automotive nature of the use, it should be fairly consistent with what was asked for in the previous request that ultimately did not transpire. You may want to note this is all pretty much very consistent with the landscaping along Wisconsin Avenue, the side and the north and east parking. The big issue with the previous request was, given the abutting of the residents to the south, declare this a no parking zone. The applicants have no problem with that. It's designated on the site plan. And then there is some extra parking along the east property line. And one difference is there is a recommendation for a kind of a display area for on the occasional temporary display of high-end or specialty cars. And I think I have just kind of the image of it here. And this is just kind of the little display that they have here. I'm not a car aficionado, However, this does, I think, provide just some compatible visual interest, and I think that's planner speak of saying it's pretty attractive and it's pretty cool little feature that would be here. So with that, and as the mayor noted, the staff recommendation pretty much follows what was coming out of the recommendation of approval for the Plan Commission. The only difference is that the property owner did ask that rather than having a landscape buffer on the south side, given the no parking zone and no use of cars in that section, and also his stated intent is to have this as probably operating with this use probably for 3 years or so before possibly redeveloping the entire site. Was asked to hold off on that south side buffer landscaping for 36 months, and then if after that point the business he wishes to continue with what is there, we can renew the conditional use grant. And with that, Mr. Barnett is here. He can speak to the kind of the business operations. Mr. Nelson, the property owner, is not here, and I will try to field some of those questions with the property, particularly since I know the question is going to be asked. The business is there. It is up and running. It kind of put us in an awkward situation, including Mr. Barnett, who was simply following the, just what his landlord is permitting. But given the use, I have no complaints or emails or calls about the business since the public notice went out. And some of the sticking issues that were previously are not, seems to be the case here. We do need to be a little proactive. I've never seen a business, just a landlord, just allow the business to go prior to any permits, but we do need to be a little more proactive going forward. But with that, I would just hand it over to the council with any questions.
Thank you, Bob. And we had reviewed this at planning once before, and there was kind of a hodgepodge before, and now not from you, but from the previous ideas. And I'd reiterate we need to follow our codes and rules before starting a business up without pre-approval. So, council, any questions for the land or for the business person or Bob?
Yeah, I guess
Alderman Benning?
for Bob, I mean, you made the comment, and that was going to be my question is, they went live in July a month ago, but we haven't granted this conditional use. Are we just grandfathering that in at this point, or is somebody being held accountable for allowing that?
I mean, my reaction would be, hey, you're opening up this business without approval. You need a conditional use grant. And at that point, it was already in process. This is kind of a drawn out process for a conditional use grant. And so it came to the point now, by the time we get around to it, we're almost completed with a conditional use grant. And given it's essentially a permitted use there in this business, and the way the operation was not getting complaints, it was a question of.
But I guess we have a process and rules, and that was violated. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody at this point, but somebody should be held accountable for that.
Yeah. No, it wasn't.
Bob, what is the ordinance authority? To Alderman Benning's point, if like just for future purposes, again, there's no significant or gross violation, but if somebody were to do this for 3-4 months, what is the city's authority?
We have authority because there is no
What do we do?
formal
Can we
approval.
chains around the building? What do you do?
Shut the business down at that point?
There is no formal approval. There's no occupancy. So I think we can send ask that, not ask, but send a notice saying you're not approved for this site, or an occupancy is not granted prior to the approval. So yes, you may not operate the business.
Sure. Attorney Eberhardt?
Yeah, Mayor, you could actually cite a property owner for making use of a property without proper approvals, contrary to the underlying zoning ordinance, so you could seek a forfeiture against them. You could also ask for an injunction, a court order prohibiting the use of the property or premises until the proper approvals are obtained. I don't know if I haven't looked lately, if there's some provision for the payment of a double fee, sort of like if you begin building improvements without pulling a building permit, they can charge you a double fee. I don't know if that's in play, but those are some enforcement options.
Thank you. Alderman Tierney?
Just real quickly, Bob, you mentioned something, and you might know it too. You said that the question about not doing the landscaping for 36 months, was the planning commission okay with that?
The Plan Commission recommendation was,
Mike?
was going off of the previous use when, with landscaping along that south property line. Following that Plan Commission, communicating with the property owner, he asked that, can I delay this for 36 months, given that there's,
So the plan commission didn't address that, right?
They addressed it in the way of recommending a buffer on that south side property line. And then following that, he, reiterated with communicating with him after Plan Commission meeting saying, hey, this is the meeting results.
At the same time, the property owner did proactively go and remove and do some of those pieces that were suggested to the
West
last
side, yeah.
piece, and tore out some asphalt and is planting grass and shrubs and is actually exceeding what was discussed, so.
So, Alderman Tierney, just to answer your question, the Plan Commission recommendation had a buffer line, landscape buffer on the south side. The council may require that as just a condition, as part of this conditional use grant. I'm taking into account, just the property owner's request to hold off on that. But again, ultimately, that's up to the council.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I recall when our previous meetings on that the landowner to the south was amicable to a business, but having that buffer.
Correct, and was very concerned about lights and car sales.
Right.
That's why they wanted it
We've
there.
eliminated a lot of that, but the buffer was sort of we had sort of wanted that. That was not negotiable.
So we can make a motion with that buffer in there, as Bob had suggested.
Yeah, and I guess to follow up from my other, Bobby, you've got a bunch of conditions in there. Are there timelines for most, like the CSM piece of it, cleaning up the property lines and that kind of stuff? I know you got 36 months on the landscaping, but do we have any?
No, it's an excellent point. Not with the CSM, and the council can build that into.
I just think if we're going to have these expectations of stuff be done, it ought to be within a certain reasonable time frame.
Yeah, and that can be part of the conditional use.
If I just add, I don't want it to reflect on the gentleman who's running the business here. It's so we're clear on that. It's the property owner. Don't want to deny him the aspect of working there, but we did have some, I thought were fair requests.
Expectations. So then if there is a motion, we can add in the timeline as suggested, as well as the setback.
I'd make that motion. For the setback, also would include the CSM, that requirements be finished.
And is there a recommended timeline, Bob, for everything to be completed for Alderman Newmeyer?
For the landscaping, the zoning code, the section of the landscaping is 12 months from occupancy.
Right, that was a timeline that was established earlier, correct?
And then for the CSM, you can do that within 12, it's kind of up to the council. You can do 6 months, 12 months.
What would you recommend, Bob?
I think, given the property lines, I've already, reached out to the WISDOT to see how that would work as far as the property lines in their right of way. 6 months.
Okay.
All right, then my motion would be for 6 months to the CSM be completed. If WISDOT isn't able to comply, how do we adjust that, though, with our 6-month timeline? Are we too inflexible with?
I think six months is an adequate amount of time to.
Okay.
Okay. Otherwise, you'd come back to council.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Alderman Benning. Mr. Brown, did you have a, I'm sorry. All right, so backing up a second. So there's a land covenant that needs to be added into the motion as well.
I would add that covenant as expressed by the clerk.
Mr. Benning, you okay with that
Second
as a
that.
second? Okay, so amended and seconded. Mr. Brown? Oh, sorry.
Are we approving the whole thing or only the amendment to add that?
The conditional use approval below with the timeline and then the additional line, not lot line, but the line issue and then now the covenant.
So it's, okay, so this is for approving the whole thing, not just to add that.
Correct. It's a conditional use grant plus.
Okay, so I had another comment.
Go ahead,
Finish up.
Alderman Gasper.
So this has,
Mike.
sorry. Thought somebody was saying my name. So this has restrictions on the hours that the business can be open. And if that's what the property owner and the business owner want, that's fine. I'm just not sure for this type of business if there's really an interest in the city restricting that.
It's not really, I mean, there was the hours that came in with the application.
But this means if they want to open at 8 AM, now they can't do it, or they have to come back to us and ask to change it, and that would not be unreasonable. So I'm just not sure why even have the restriction included in here at all. Because, we have noise ordinances and stuff. If they're sitting there with the garage doors open and making lots of noise at midnight, disturbing the neighbors, we already have that covered. We don't need to have their hours restricted to enforce that.
Well, again, with a conditional use grant, ultimately, it comes down to the council approving or the conditional use grant and the conditions within that. And should the council not want to, well, personally, I think it's traditional for a business request such as this to have hours. Otherwise, you can just simply say 8 to 6 or what have you.
Mr. Barnett, may I ask you to address the council on this issue? Is there a concern for you with the hours as Alderman Gasper has presented?
I would say I don't have a concern with it. Those were more along the lines of just hours that kind of currently fit into my life schedule, if you will. As far as in the future, maybe opening earlier or being open a little bit later, that's, I guess, kind of subject to what the community is requesting, because some people like to come in earlier. And but as far as being later, I most of the time am not there much later than 7 unless there's, say, a particular project or something. But I would like to add, as far as the comment made about noise or obstructions or anything like that. Even during the daytime, I am very aware of in the community and people around, and I do not want to. I take that into consideration and make sure that I'm operating as best as I can.
Sure. Alderman Gasper's point for you, though, to consider in this moment is that right now you'd be restricted to 9 to 5 for customers. And if you ever wanted to change that to 8 to 7 or 8 to 6, you'd have to come back, come back before council for that approval. So now would be the best time for us to amend this motion so that you had that greater flexibility. So if you think in the future you're going to open from, say, 7 to 6, now would be the time to put those business hours of operation in your conditional use grant so that down the road you don't have to come back to ask.
Sure. The only thing that I would maybe ask for then is that it be changed to 8 a.m. and no earlier than that, and remain at the same closing time of, well, actually, I'm sorry, I'll change it to 8 to 6, and that would be the earliest and latest that I would have the doors open for people to show up.
Well, by our grant, you would be then limited to only a 50-hour work week.
That would be
and Saturdays
awesome.
by appointments. Right. And then Alderman Gasper and I would both like to drive around that Mustang Mach-1.
You're more than welcome, if the doors are officially open, to come up and check out anything that's in there, like the 35 Ford delivery sedan that's, just there for a friend right now.
Just having them available for the Fish Day Parade. So Alderman Newmeyer, are you willing to adjust your motion one more time to reflect his request for 8 to 6?
I would adjust my motion, and then is the Mach 1 a 351 or a 390?
It is still an original 351 4-speed.
So that is a 8 to 6 p.m. or 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday only.
Yes.
Agree.
Alderman Benning, you're good with that?
Agree.
Alderman Sigwart?
So can
We
we
have a
just,
motion and a second. Yes, sir.
okay, my only question is, you're looking at this as sort of a temporary business, other words, somewhere here say I heard that maybe down the road, 3 or 4 years, it's going to be residential. But I know, but you're aware of that, we're aware of that, but it has nothing to do with the motion we're passing.
I would love nothing more after having a second full-time job and finally being able to have this opportunity and being a longtime resident of Port Washington and being within the community, that now that I am here, I would love to be here for a long time, because I do not just see this as a business venture. I do more than just cleaning people's cars, but that's what people understand the nuts and bolts of what I do. So no, I have voiced my opinion to the landowner quite a few times already in the handful of years that I've known him, that if it did turn out to somehow be a residential property, to see if there was any possibility of having a first floor detailing studio while there may be residents above that. So no, I've heard nothing but good things about what this location used to be, and I'm glad that I can be potentially part of the community, and looking forward to giving back, and would love to stay there as long as I'm allowed.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mason. Council?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question for Bob. Did the abutting neighbor to the south contact you with any comments about the proposed hours of operation?
No, notices as for any conditional use, notices went out to 200 feet within the property. I did not receive any comment either for or against.
Did that abutting owner show up at the Plan Commission meeting at which the 9 to 5 hours were recommended?
No.
Okay. And
For
then,
the previous,
For the auto dealership.
okay.
and then just for the council on the issue of the land covenant, first of all, it's not on the agenda. And second of all, it needn't be, because the land covenant is a unilateral document given by and executed by the property owner, by which he acknowledges and accepts the conditional use grant that is applicable to his property. Thank you. Applicable to the property. So it doesn't require council action. They go hand in glove, the conditional use grant and land covenant, but the land covenant doesn't require action. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's a motion and a second. Any further conversation on the motion? All right. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Excellent. That motion passes. So we move on to the next agenda item. I just wanted to point out that Bob Harris used the word Byzantine, and that was fantastic. Yes, that is a well-done laid plan. I don't know if someone bet you that you wouldn't be able to use it tonight, but good job. All right, moving on to unfinished business then. Agenda item 9A, ordinance 2021-10, amending Chapter 1 of the City of Port Washington Municipal Code, second reading. I wanted to start out here and thank Alderwoman Postel for introducing this last 2 weeks ago in my absence. Mr. Brown and myself, as well as the city attorney, worked through this and reviewed this. And I just wanted to bring up a couple of quick points. And I know I had sent council a note, but really the request comes to make a few small adjustments in the ordinance. One is flexibility on the start time of the meetings moving the city council meetings back to 6 o'clock. And I'll turn it over to Alderwoman Postel to talk about some, how we used your feedback for a possible amendment to this. But really one of the pieces, and if you look at the clock now, it's 5 to 10. Community access, we have one community member here now, former Mayor Gottlieb. Thank you, Mayor Gottlieb, for being here, Assemblyman Gottlieb and Secretary Gottlieb and Engineer Gottlieb, whatever else titles, but we appreciate you being here. And one of the pieces that was brought up is a core area of being able to communicate and engage the community in our different meetings. And one of the strategies and tactics would be to move the meetings up. So I appreciated your comments and then your consideration in that. The other piece too is staff time and retention of great staff and attraction of great staff. I gave each of the council members and city staff just a breakdown of other boards, commissions, committees, and when they start and end across the city. 7:30, we are an hour and a half after everything else that's scheduled. School board starts at 6, and again, it's just an access piece for families. And the other piece is, again, tonight we had to move up guest appearances and move around the agenda, and having talked to several of you, I don't really care to do that. These are posted meetings, and if anyone had come to hear, any concerns about some things to the south or for instance, our other board pieces, it would be nice to go to those different components. The other components that are in here, Alderwoman Postel's amendment that I think are important for you to consider as well is the structuring of the committees and commissions and boards during the year. One of the pieces I think that is a really good opportunity for us as we move into strategic planning here is to align those boards, committees, and commissions to the strategic plan of the city and have us adopt the department heads' recommendations for the work, clear scope and charter of what those commissions and committees are supposed to be doing. To Alderman Sigwart's point at the very start of the meeting a few hours ago, we've got this administration committee. Really, no one knows what they do. We've got a community member appointed to it who said, yeah, I'll be on it because you never meet. And we should have very clear guidance on those pieces, so this would help us with that. One other piece that was brought up is the ability to call for meetings. It says in the current ordinance that we could pull something together as early as 6 hours. 24 hours, I believe, is really the kind of minimum for us as a council to come together. I can't imagine a scenario where we would be able to even get a quorum in 6 hours. And in the cities past, that necessarily hasn't been there. So that's a pretty negotiable point. But I appreciate you guys, everyone looking into this, having these conversations, and Alderwoman Postel really doing the legwork on this starting, before I was even elected mayor. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and then we'll open up for conversation on the ordinance.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Knightsky. It is on. Should I yell?
Oh, please.
Now, we introduced this 2 weeks ago, and since then, we've gotten significant feedback from council, from staff, from many residents. The proposed start time was 6 o'clock. We're suggesting a compromise to 6:30 start time. The second public comments section of the agenda, we were suggesting to remove it, and feedback received from that, we're agreeing to add it back into the agenda, so we'll have 2 sections of public comments. It was asked why we didn't have a specific fee for the cost of the special meetings. Right now, we'd like to leave it as is because the fees for the special meetings were discussed last year during the creation of Ordinance 2020-9, but none were agreed upon or added to the city's fee schedule at that time. It doesn't exist. So stating that a fee may be charged allows the action to occur dependent upon resolution of Common Council. Also, the 6-hour notice is, we can certainly amend that, but in the event that there's a disaster-related issue, time sensitivity or safety or anything like that, that 6-hour time frame has actually been in effect since at least 2013. So those were the items that we said that, okay, we'd put back in or we would compromise or update. And I'll leave it open for discussion.
Thank you, Alderwoman Postel. Any other questions or concerns?
Just one
Alderman Tierney?
I mentioned this to you, Mayor, when you and I were talking, but the whole 6-hour thing, when I first ran for council, and nobody was running against me, so it wasn't a real big deal, but I heard mostly from people who had been concerned about a lot of meetings that were held on very short notice, and there were a lot of people that were concerned at that time about some of the development that was going on, and they felt that it was, basically, I remember one comment particularly, I heard about the meeting 4 hours after it was over. And they wanted to make a comment, well, they did not feel that was a good thing. So, I mean, I understand the whole 6-hour if there was like a major flood. When does that ever happen? Or something like that. But I really think we need to stay away from these very short notice meetings. Whether they're allowed or not, I don't think they're a good idea.
Alderman Benning?
And I'll reiterate our discussion. For me, 6 or 6:30, 6 is way too early just because of work days and travel and needing food before a long meeting at council. But also as a member of Finance Committee, which historically has met beforehand so that folks like ourselves, like staff, like Carol Worth, don't have to make 2 different meetings on 2 different nights or things like that. 6:30 is going to be a challenge to cover, and then I don't know when we would do finance. If it's a different day of the week, I'd hope it wasn't, but doing a 6:30 doesn't leave us any time for finance beforehand for the most part.
I think that's one of the pieces too, where going back to both traditions and legacy components with say finance. I think one of the expectations moving forward with strategy is to be able to lay out that the finance department and the team that works on that committee lay out a schedule in advance of because it's very predictable if you look back at a 12-month run of when committees are, when other time would be, so that we, again, aldermen and women who are not appointed to finance are able to make that meeting as well. So thank you for that. Any other questions? Mr. Gasper?
From my personal experience of having worked in Milwaukee and commuted home, moving the meetings really before 7 starts to become a kind of a burden to make. I've worked as a consulting engineer, so it's nominally an 8 to 5 job, but you never leave at 5. If you leave at 6, you're usually doing good. And for people that are, we have a lot of people in the city who don't live here, who do work a ways away and come home. And if they want to attend a common council meeting, you move it up to 6 o'clock, it's almost impossible to make it. 6:30 would be tough. I think, and I do respect the time of our city employees and stuff and understand that we are keeping them late too. But for community members to attend meetings and such, I think before 7 starts to become difficult. And I'm on a couple different boards that do meet earlier, and those are often have meant leaving work early those days. And if you have a job that lets you do it, that's great. Some people aren't going to have jobs that let you do it, and we don't really want to exclude people from being able to be on the Common Council because they don't have a job with flexible hours. 6:30 is probably doable. I think 7 would be better if we want to move the meetings earlier. With the concerns with when would the Finance Committee have their meetings be held, back, I don't know when it changed. At some point back, I don't know, at least 20 years ago, Finance Committee used to meet on the alternate weeks to the Common Council. And the advantage of if that were to occur would be that preliminary meeting minutes could be out that the rest of us who are not attending the Finance Committee meeting could actually see, so we could understand what was discussed, what was moved on without having to be there. So there would be an advantage to that. There used to be more time-sensitive stuff on that, but since we've moved the event permits to having to be in 60 days ahead of time, we don't really have people turning in liquor licenses on Friday that need to be approved on Tuesday so they can be out the next Friday selling liquor or selling beer anymore. And that used to be one of the things that kind of motivate us to have this quick schedule. If some of that could go a little bit longer, it would allow those of us who aren't on the finance committee to actually see what's happening there without having to actually attend the meeting. But back to the times, yeah, I'd be much happier seeing it be 7 p.m. than going all the way to 6:30 right now.
For me, I'm comfortable with moving up as early as 6:30, but no earlier. I think we can still fit a finance committee meeting at 5:30 to 6:30 as long as they would potentially be. There's an hour. I don't know if we had ever had a finance and license committee meeting longer than an hour. So I'm comfortable moving up to 6:30. The other piece that I'm potentially concerned about is how I'm very curious how we're going to do, and we talked about this, Mr. Mayor, is the individual boards, commissions, committees, and their strategic mission and purpose and how it aligns with the city. So I'm very interested in how we're going to determine that and develop that. So whatever I can offer my services for, I would do so. 6:30, short answer.
And thank you for that. And, you know, and I have great empathy for the commuting part. My office is 2300 West Highway 44 in Oshkosh. So, you know, and like you, Mike, and everybody else, you know, I just got to manage that. And it was a decision I made when I chose to run. So if there's no further conversation, then I'd be looking for a motion.
So just to be, okay, yeah, sorry. So let's
No,
do
it's
that
okay.
motion first before I make a comment.
I'll make a motion to approve the mayoral ordinance with the start time at 6:30, adding back the second public comments, and adjusting the 6-hour notice to a 24-hour notice.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second?
I will second that motion.
All right, any questions or concerns about the motion? Further comments?
Yes, I'd like to add, let's make sure the communication is more than adequate for our community members and for our citizenry. I want to make sure that we aren't changing this, you know, again in 6 months or a year when the council turns over, that we should maintain the 6:30 cadence for some length of longevity and tenure, that we can manage that so that citizens can find us and they know where we're going to be at Tuesday night at every first and third Tuesday at 6:30. Here we are.
In addition, I'd ask if we would are we able to make the ordinance effective on a date to allow council members to, so would you be amicable to effective as of October 1st to give everybody here 3 meetings to get started before we start the 6:30 meeting time if this were to pass?
Is there a timeline to the city attorney for publishing for a change of ordinance?
No, if you approve it tonight with that prospective effective date, it has to get published just as if it were effective immediately. It just has a delayed effective date, but it has to be published.
I like October 1st. I like giving a little bit of lead time here so we can make sure that communication is out there for the public.
Okay, so
And we can make work requirement shifts.
I'll modify that motion to make it effective October 1st.
Alderman Plaitner?
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions? Alderman Tierney?
If I missed it, we didn't hold a public hearing on this and we don't need to?
No, this is a second reading.
All right, fine.
Alderman Benning?
I guess, you know, if you adopt this, I'd like to make sure we have somebody who's making a plan for Finance and License Committee, what we're going to do. I'm looking at my friend here, the chairman next to me. Because I think that's as important and critical to make sure that's communicated, both for us and for the public.
I will take that action.
Thank you.
I would like to add, too, that embedded in this ordinance is flexibility for electronic meetings. We have the option of utilizing Zoom more frequently in the event that someone cannot be here, or they have a long ways to travel in order to make the meeting on time.
Excellent point. Thank you. Right. Sit in the back with your gray poupon. Okay. So seeing no further comments, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
All right. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Move on to the last agenda item before potentially going into closed session, which is hopefully a simple and fun one. I was asked by a community member, and I completely agreed with this idea of trying to figure out different ways that the city can support the school district in building a greater sense of community pride, and which is why we have Resolution 2021-13 of renaming a portion of North Holden Street as Pirates Way. And I would ask if the council is open to this. After having spoken with the administration at the high school and a couple of teachers, they would like us to not have it plural and just have it Pirate Way. Again, this is an opportunity for the city to support our one high school town, and I spoke with the high school administration, as well as staff and students, and also learned that the one property owner whose address would potentially be impacted by this on Holden Street is deceased, and the family is looking to sell the property, and the school district will be participating in that conversation. The school district has no changes to the high school. The high school's address, physical address, is Jackson Street.
For me, I like this as the sort of a beginning of a great relationship with the school district, right? This is great. I would move approval.
All right, there's a motion by,
And I'll second that.
and seconded by Alderman Benning.
Mr. Mayor, no one's going to be offended by this, are they?
No, I hope not.
Okay, good.
No.
I do have one quick
Yeah, Alderman Benning.
clarification. And so we're talking about from Jackson to the end of the block by the end of the school parking lot, correct?
Correct. So it goes from, so it goes from the beginning of that block to the end, to when you
So
drive
it's
into
in
the high
front
school.
of, it's in front of the school there.
Yeah, it's only that,
Because Jackson is by the Performing Arts Center.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
Okay.
And then the other piece I think is important, Alderman Gasper?
I did have one question. I noticed that it said that the cost was not applicable, but says we have to refile the plats and stuff with it. I'm not sure. I'm sure the county's negligible. I don't know if that has to go back to the state, and also what staff time is and what the cost of the sign replacements are. So there is a cost. It's not applicable.
I can briefly speak to that, and then the city attorney can jump in as well. With regard to the street sign, that's kind of a sunk cost because that's stuff we would otherwise have in stock regardless. And the staff time as well is a sunk cost too. So really, there's just the filing cost, which I don't know exactly what that is. The city attorney could speak to that probably more, but that's probably nominal.
$30 to record the affidavit of correction, that's it.
For subdivision, plat doesn't have to go back to the state for approval?
No, it's just done by affidavit of correction on its own. Yep.
That's a good catch, though, Alderman Gasper. I appreciate that diligence.
Pirate Way elsewhere in the county, is there?
No, no,
Do that search too.
no. It was done.
I'd like to know the discussion between the English teachers about pirate versus pirates.
Well, there was our attorney also brought up, where do you put the apostrophe, if it's possessive, not possessive, et cetera. And they were like, listen, here's what we want. We want people to turn left into the high school on Pirate Way. And then we want to reinforce that there's a way that we act as pirates, how we represent ourselves, build our community, et cetera. And the other piece is that a lot of the alumni groups, when I ran it past them, were excited because as they have their class reunions, they're going to buy signs from the city to auction off and raise money with, so. Alderman Newmeyer, did you have anything else to add, since it's your ward?
I wholly support this. It's a great idea for the school and the city.
All right. Any other conversation? All right, then what I'd be looking for is, we've got the motion and it's been seconded. All in favor signify by saying "ar." Opposed, nay. All right, well, it will be very exciting for the school district. Moving on, forthcoming events.
3 Lakes, Wisconsin this weekend, Harrington Beach next weekend. Oh, and then the baby's getting baptized the weekend after that. Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah, any others?
I'm going to my 50th class year reunion, except it's actually 51 because it was canceled
It's 50 plus COVID. Excellent.
in Ohio.
Oh, well, the Turnpike and all the BPs on your way, you'll do well.
It's just into Ohio, so the Ohio Turnpike are only going to be on for about 3 miles.
Oh, excellent. Any other forthcoming events? Any other public comments or appearances? All right, then I'm going to look for a motion to convene in closed session per Wisconsin State Statute 19.851G to confer with legal counsel for the common counsel who is rendering advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the council with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved, to wit, discuss impact fee analysis summary report.
So moved?
Moved, is there a second?
Second.
It is seconded. This needs a voice vote, correct? Okay. We'll go with Alderman Benning. Alderman Postel is in there about 4,000 times from those resolutions.
exhausted.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Alderman Postel?
Aye.
Alderman Newmeyer?
Aye.
Alderman Gasper? Aye. Alderman Benning? Aye. Alderman Pleitner? Aye. Alderman Tierney? Aye. And Alderman Sigwart? Aye. We are now in closed session.